You are watching a master at work.
This shit called drone. Here we go.
Smoking, watching movie, joking with the young and goofy. Scrolling through his phone and seen a Cuban link that's worn by Gucci. Fascinated by gangster shit and trying to get rich or fake it like you got it. So everyone double tap his pick. Depositing fake reality for salary, non-negotiable. Overdosing on sociable, quotable. So the locals know that his chain is a movie. That his bitches is bougie. That his activist leaning. That he really unruly. 27 with pocket money and 4 world rats. Ain't punching clocks, but punctuation on where the plug at. Dry snitching and fishing for likes with frequent visits. Posting pictures with burners for stripes and recognition. Flexing with 4 bands, he smiled for the cameraman. The Instagram is location, his followers tapping in. 3 enemies waiting, 1 bullet, 1 mask. Got his fucking brains blown out over 2 hashtags, you know.
May not always be around, but I don't need you so bad. I need you bad. May not always get in line, but I don't need you so bad. I need you bad.
What's going on, y'all? It's the mop, not the wop. And I want to bring y'all a message. As you see, what we got pinned in the chat is the article I wrote. And that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. We won't be long. If y'all got any questions, put them in the chat, and when we reach the end, I'll answer whatever questions y'all got. But today I want to talk about a phenomenon that explains much of what we suffer under, but rarely name with clarity. We know the Dunning-Kruger effect. The incompetent overestimate themselves while the competent underestimate themselves. We know the Peter principle. Individuals are promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. But these concepts describe only moments of failure. What happens after the incompetent arrive? What happens when their incompetence is not exposed properly, not corrected, but instead enthroned, insulated, and normalized? That is when an island of incompetence is born. An island of incompetence is not just incompetence. It's incompetence in power, fortified, defended, and normalized into a permanent domain. Picture this, a leader, manager, or official elevated through error, bias, or bluster. The lack of qualification becomes obvious, yet instead of collapse, they begin to build walls. They surround themselves with flatterers rather than challengers. They punish dissent, reward compliance, and reframe incompetence as loyalty. Over time, a protective reef forms around them, keeping tides of incompetent scrutiny and reform at bay. What remains is a zone of distorted reality, where incompetence is not just present, but sovereign. The current crisis in our federal government is not merely administrative. It's the deliberate construction of an island of incompetence designed to supplant the apolitical merit-based system established by the Pendleton Act of 1883. How does such an island sustain itself? Through 4 reinforcing strategies. The courtier culture, with the ejection of truth. Subordinates quickly learn that advancement comes not through skill but through affirming the leader's illusions. Truth tellers are exiled, yes men are promoted, and in this current administration, we see this mechanism at its sharpest. Look at the political retribution. 3 of the FBI's most experienced operational leaders, Brian Driscoll, Steve Jensen, and Spencer Evans, were fired in what a lawsuit claims was a campaign of retribution. The lawsuit alleges FBI Director Kash Patel admitted the firings were likely illegal but necessary because the, I quote, FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it. The sacrifice of critical counterterrorism expertise for political fealty is the purest distillation of the courtier culture. And there's the culture of fear. At the Pentagon, the purging of senior officials by Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has created an emerging culture of fear. There's a culture of intimidation and retaliation. That's quote. Senior defense officials report that experts now simply keep your head down and not necessarily try to do anything to the advantage of the organization. The consequences of self-censorship on matters of national security. Then there's a mandatory loyalty test. The loyalty test is now formalized. Federal job applicants for positions GS5 and above must answer essay questions detailing how they would help advance the president's policy priorities. A measure critics have accurately called a blatant loyalty test. Then there's the bureaucratic armor, the weaponizing of red tape. The island wraps itself in rules, processes, and red tape, making it difficult for outsiders to penetrate or assess real performance. This is achieved by creating intentional friction. You have engineered paralysis. The Project 2025 blueprint explicitly recommends the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, pause application processing and backlogs become excessive. The government can then deliberately understaff forms, engineer the backlog, and use that manufactured incompetence as a political justification to stop legal immigration pathways. Then there's the suppression of accountability. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth reformed the Inspector General process, claiming it had been weaponized by complainers, ideologues, and poor performers. New procedures mandate a rapid 7-day assessment of complaints, specifically seeking to identify and manage complainants who submit multiple complaints without credible evidence. This is not reform. This is the weaponization of silence to eliminate internal checks. Then there's the narrative control, and reframing the chaos as virtue. Incompetence is reframed as virtue, decisiveness, boldness, thinking differently. Criticism becomes negativity or disloyalty. Look at the Restoring Justice. Attorney General Pam Bondi defended her tenure by claiming her primary goal was to end the weaponization of justice. Yet, under that banner, her department indicted a former FBI director and dropped investigations into political allies, gutting the public corruption unit. The rhetoric of reform justified the reality of political enforcement. And there's the warrior culture. Secretary Pete Hegseth defends his aggressive civilian purges and the push for gender-neutral male standard fitness tests by claiming he's restoring a warrior culture and making the military more lethal. This cultural message is used to deflect from the simultaneous loss of 60,000 plus defense civilians. Technical experts needed to run a modern war machine. And there's the scientific deception. HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. Make America Healthy Again agenda uses the language of transparency but promotes non-consensus science, such as linking acetaminophen used to autism, risking public health by causing patients to reject the only safe painkiller during pregnancy. Then there's the incompetence multiplication and how they build this fortress. The leader elevates others in their image, and they populating the island with more incompetence, ensuring mutual protection. The plan for this multiplication is codified through schedule policy /career, the new Schedule F. This mechanism strips civil service protection from policy influence positions, enabling the executive to hire and fire quickly. This structural alteration targets high-level jobs, GS 13, 14, 15s, potentially affecting over 500,000 employees. This isn't passive failure. It's an active engineering of an administrative system where compliance is the highest credential. But here's the paradox. Why do these islands persist when the sea of competence surrounds them? Because, and here is the paradox, competence often accommodates incompetence. Competent people work around the island rather than storm it, because the cost of confrontation are high. Institutions prefer stability over reform, even if that stability is built on dysfunction. We saw the paradox realized in the mass exodus of civil servants. The fork in the road. Approximately 75,000 federal workers chose the deferred resignation offer. This was a conscious decision by thousands of skilled professionals to walk away from public service rather than fight an administration whose stated intention, according to former OMB Director Russell Vought, was for federal workers to be traumatically affected. Then there's the institutional amnesia. The fear of losing retirement benefits, coupled with hostile rhetoric, drove a spike of nearly 40% in early retirement applications. This irreversible loss of institutional memory is the ultimate victory for the island. It removes the very capacity necessary to challenge and correct future failures. Thus, islands survive not in spite of competence, but because of competence's reluctance to act. What are the costs? The island of incompetence is never neutral. It has ripple effects. It's an erosion of morale. Government workers are experiencing profound psychological trauma. They're reporting fear, rage, overwhelm, and grief due to mass layoffs and conflicting directives, jobs insecurity. Clinicians report clients are curtailing spending or discontinuing therapy due to job insecurity, demonstrating the direct human cost of this chaos. It's institutional decay. The failures are systemic and quantifiable. Look at the cyber collapse, government shutdown forced a furlough of 2/3, that's 65%, of critical cybersecurity and infrastructure security agencies, CISA. Furthermore, hundreds of CISA's technical personnel are being directed for reassignment to immigration enforcement roles. Political directive that risks termination for those who decline management-directed reassignment. Then there's the defense readiness. The DoD currently faces 20,000 shortfall in cyber professionals, leaving 20% of its cyber mission force units below operational readiness. Meanwhile, Secretary Pete Hegseth is relaxing mandatory cybersecurity training frequency. The administrative paralysis. Processing times for green card renewals, Form I-90 skyrocketed by 938% in the second quarter of the fiscal year 2025, contributing to a historic backlog of 11.3 million pending cases under the purview of DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's department. This is the consequences of actively degrading core government functions. Cultural contamination and geopolitical retreat. The America First ideology driving the purges translates to a systematic withdrawal from the global leadership. The administration has prohibited new programming and signaled its intent to shut down the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is USAID, creating global security concerns and leaving vulnerable communities with vanishing partner. So what's the philosophy of the island? What does this teach us about power and human systems? Competence alone is not enough. Systems must have mechanisms for accountability, correction, and feedback. Without these, incompetence in power is not self-correcting, it's self-reinforcing. Power abhors a vacuum. If the competent retreat from leadership, the incompetent rush in, confident beyond reason. Truth is fragile. On the island of incompetence, reality itself bends because survival depends not on being right, but on being aligned with the ruler's delusions. Civilization is a contest between islands and seas. The sea of competence must decide whether to absorb, ignore, or confront the islands. So, how do we confront islands of incompetence? The first step is recognition. Too often, we normalize incompetence and power as just the way it is. We must say plainly, this is not an unfortunate accident. This is an entrenched domain of failure. You have to expose the reef, tear away the protective narratives, the bureaucracy, the false loyalty test, force the island into contact with reality. When EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin faced dissent, the agency put approximately 140 to 160 staffers on administrative leave after they signed a declaration of dissent, accusing Zeldin of ignoring scientific data to benefit polluters. To confront the island, we must protect the dissenters because they are the first line of accountability. The competence must create rival models, rival spaces, rival cultures. The sea must show there is a better way, not just complain about the island. We must demand accountability using quantifiable data, such as leveraging the Government Accountability Office's high-risk list, which identifies 38 areas vulnerable to fraud, waste, and mismanagement, areas whose oversight has been directly undermined by personal purges. And then there's moral courage. Ultimately, dismantling islands requires individuals willing to risk position, comfort, and a reputation and risk your comfort and your reputation in order to speak and to act. So in closing, the island of incompetence is not rare. It exists in your workplace, your government, your schools, your communities, perhaps even within yourself. The danger is not simply that incompetence exists. The danger is that incompetence, once enthroned, it builds fortresses to protect itself. The question we face is not whether these islands will appear. They always will. The question is, will we let them expand into islands that strangle the sea of competence, or will we develop the courage and clarity to reclaim them? I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Like, comment, subscribe. And tomorrow we'll be back for a different spirit. Until next time, it's the mop, not the wop. And we gone.